like a cloud, and I'm just going to start that sentence over. Okay. So The Peaceful Aura Nibbling Dungeon by Dryad for Falcon's Tales of Dungeons Anthology 3. Giggling, the gaggle of goblinettes giddily gallivanted as they galloped to the dungeon gate. Say it again, Daddy, the young dungeon pleaded. Her daddy obliged her with her favorite true tale turned telepathic tongue twister and had her try to echo it. Practicing emulating speaking in the common language used by both adventurers and monsters with telepathic tongue twisters was among the earliest lessons in dungeon core homeschooling. The better versed in common speech wordplay dungeon cores were from their childhood, the more complex and enjoyable the world play they could manifest for riddles and quests to please their visitors when they were grown. Luxuriating in laughter was an antidote to the taunting his daughter had received from the other young crystalline dungeon cores, her peer group of gemstones who would grow up to emanate their own dungeon buildings when they amassed enough of the ambient energy known as mana and enough knowledge. They had teased her for being different, enough such that she had asked to be homeschooled. And with the adventurer's Mother's Day around the corner, what better way to simultaneously teach his precious offspring some wordplay, some enunciation, and why her mother was the safest, most beloved, trusted, respected dungeon among all adventurers and monsters of any species in their vicinity, and truly unique, different, special, perfect, just like her. Her mother dungeon and the building and grounds she emanated as their home were a haven, a sacred grove for rejuvenation, all by her mother's dedicated design. Welcome to Paulette's Palace of Palettes, Palettes, and Palettes, the peaceful or nibbling dungeon. Please, no plundering the populace, the guards greeted the goblinettes. The gracious guards gathered the gobstruck goblinettes and, darling, if you focus on your adorable alliterations, our dear daughter won't have time for her mana-manifesting meditation this morning, pretty precious stone Paulette politely pronounced with a telepathic wink and peck, beaming beatifically at her beau and babe. The gemstone equivalent of a grin graced all of her facets as all three of the loving family settled in on their cozy couch for the dad's rosy recapitulation. It unfolded approximately thus. Is it true? The first goblinette asked the first guard. Is this dungeon really a vampire? Amid nervous tittles from the younglings, the guards flashed each other knowing smiles and encouraged them to sit comfortably for a moment, to become familiar with the ambiance of the dungeon before them, and to evaluate whether they'd agree to its terms and enter. What have you heard? Let's start there, kindly offered the guard. Timidly, the second goblinette whispered, We heard that no one ever leaves the dungeon with any treasure. Sometimes they think they're going to just be there an hour and they stay all night. Sometimes the dungeon feeds on them like a vampire. If we enter, will the dungeon eat us? The human guard dismounted her faithful hippogriff steed and removed her helmet so the younglings could see the sincerity of her smile. All who enter our dungeon agree to her terms. She's very clear with everyone from the beginning what their experience will include, though each adventurer or monster who enters, of any species from any land, is welcome to innovate their own experiences within her parameters. The only blood drawn anywhere in this dungeon is the prick of a finger to produce blood ink for a quill, signing the magically binding agreement. On this note in the narrative, Paulette politely paused her partner to give their charming child a chance to chime in. Sweetie, do you remember what our motto is? The first nursery rhyme we ever taught you. Beaming through her gem, her little one recited from rote, All shall be fed, no blood shall be shed. Paulette and her husband empathically linked to confer and agreed it was time for their daughter to understand their dungeon's ethos and origin and how she herself came to be. Very good, sweetie, very good. I shall reveal what every adventurer or monster learns the first time they approach and ask the guards or the welcome gnome to let them meet me and explore the grounds and facilities I emanate and develop. First, though, a bit of context. When I was a youngling dungeon core crystal just like you, I was simply lonely. I was an only child, and my only companions were the monsters your Grampy dungeon manifested. Many of them were so very scary, all the gnashing teeth and prickly scales and acid fire breathing and stomping. I tried so hard to have them as my friends. I tried every day to get them to notice me and care how I was doing, because I cared how they were doing. Only one monster ever seemed to register how loudly I was thinking in its direction. Please, Mr. Monster, can you stay safe today and come play with me? Once, the one jubilant day of my whole childhood, I very clearly heard him think back at me. Thank you kindly, little missy. I shall do what I can after I do what I must. That one conversation, that was the only thing I experienced my whole childhood that I consider as having formed a friendship. Each day I would think invitingly, caringly toward my would-be playmate, and each night he would think back appreciatively, truly, but bound to his service. All the rest of your Grampy Dungeons monsters' thoughts that I could hear were always about marauding, and I just had to tune them out and stop trying to convince them to be my playmates. And even if I had wanted them to be, your Grampy Dungeon always had them out conquering other dungeons, and not all of them would make it home. Your Granny Dungeon told me not to get too attached, so I thought maybe I could make friends with the guests they were letting visit, the adventurers. But the adventurers didn't seem to know or care that I existed, and many of them, well, the monsters didn't let many of them stick around long either, and I wasn't supposed to care, but I did. Mommy told me not to tell Daddy, that it was very unique and special and not supposed to happen to a dungeon, but I could feel them. Anytime one of Daddy's monsters was defeated in our halls, anytime an adventurer was vanquished in our chambers, I could feel them. I could hear their thoughts. I could see who they cared about, who they were missing, who they loved, whose final moments in battle they had witnessed before their own. Through their own eyes, I could taste how their auras changed. In the moments they experienced fear and loss, I could taste how they would exude joy and relief if their comrades saved them, if they made it through another day of adventuring intact and together. When I told Mommy I could feel grief and taste auras, she bade me hush. I was never to think another word of this anywhere anyone could hear. Empaths and energy vampires are not welcome among dungeon kind. It would defeat the purpose of all the elaborate trap building and monster army amassing and strategizing and clan rivalries and everything your daddy dungeon promulgates. If a dungeon could gather energy simply by tasting adventurers directly without the adventurers having to die in a dungeon for their mana to be absorbed, or if a dungeon cared too much about adventurers to function, your Granny Dungeon had quietly cautioned me. There has to be a better way, I had consoled myself. We dungeons can coexist mutually beneficially with adventurers rather than set our traps and send our monsters to kill them to absorb their mana, I envisioned. I resolved to find a way to manifest that symbiosis and to extend it equally to monsters. As soon as I could gather enough valor, I rolled out to find my own path. My peers disdained me, claiming that to be a pacifist dungeon was an oxymoron. Ostracized, other dungeons laughed. I did not mind. I wanted the pain to stop. Years of feeling, hearing, seeing, tasting grief. Lampooning that I cared about what happened to adventurers, bellicose bully dungeons teased me, calling me human smitten or even human smitten, but it was not just humans. Adventurers of all species, monsters of all species. Mourning for loss was universal. I did not differentiate among the various ways of outwardly acknowledging the passing of a comrade or a loved one, unique to elves or orcs, some of which resembled celebrations of memories. Their internal sensations of loss, to me, were all as one. Any grief was more than I could bear. In a transcendent mana manifesting meditation, just like the lessons your daddy and I gave you, I observed about myself that were anyone to perish in my own emanations as I grew into full dungeonhood, it would shatter me. I knew other dungeons had used a portion of their mana to build gardens. That appealed to me, a place of peace. If an adventurer were to visit, if I were to taste their aura, I yearned for that only to be the sweet flavors of relief, release, relaxation, joy, such as can be felt in the serenity of nature at a time of external and internal peace. Aura, you see, is mana that living beings naturally emanate. Like any other mana, it can be a source of nourishment for us dungeons. The naturally emanating glow of a healthy living being's aura is a renewable resource, something most don't even realize that they are producing. And if sampled in small enough doses at a time, it may be absorbed by a courteous, thoughtful, respectful dungeon with no ill effect to the other living being. Rather than profit from slaughter, rather than obtaining my sustenance at the expense of adventurers and monsters by reclaiming their mana when I died on the premises I manifested, I had vowed to myself that were I ever to ingest some of the mana that other living beings naturally emanate, it would not ever be for malice, only to nourish. I would merely lure adventurers and monsters in with joys, and with their informed consent, simply nibble safe amounts of the mana of each for my survival. You see, the more joy, glee, relaxation, relief, fulfillment, connection, rejuvenation, health a living being experiences, the more vibrant and full and strong and resilient their aura becomes. The more they replenish, the more they can share, a reciprocation, symbiosis, respectful and fair. And so I emanated and manifested and cultivated all you see here. The how doesn't matter. That's a story for when you've grown enough to learn enough dungeoneering for yourself, Paulette lovingly expressed to her adoring dungeon core daughter. The why is our lesson for today, she continued. I simply recognized that by providing the right healing environments, I could provide adventurers and even monsters with so much fulfillment during their visits to me that they had more aura than they needed to survive. I can skim the mana from their excess aura such that I survive courtesy of their energy, but while doing them no lasting harm, rather than setting traps or sending monsters into battle with adventurers to absorb their mana when they died in my dungeon, like how all my peers and relatives have fed for millennia. I wanted none of that bitterness, only the sweetness of their healing in me. At most, if I were particularly depleted and in need of replenishment, if I ingested a tidbit more of their aura than they anticipated and their mana stores dipped just a teensy bit, they might need a nap to a bit in me while I lovingly comfort them. While there are, as you know, dear, guest suites in the cottage out back, sometimes they make pallets, straw beds, to stay near their horses, unicorns, pegasi, hippogriffs, or other steeds in our barns. In time, word spread of a dungeon who did not set traps, but set out welcome mats, who did not breed marauding monsters, but adopted stray birds and grazing animals and gave them room to freely raise their families without fear of commodification and feasting, who thirsted not for blood or notoriety or conquest, but for companionship and serenity. Adventurers of all species and monsters of all species equally, so long as they pledged peaceful conduct within her. The first curious explorers were surprised yet pleased that I addressed them directly, and when I explained my philosophy and intent. Weary of always feeling on edge, never knowing what travails faced them around the next corner, both my first adventurer guests and my first monster guests were grateful for a moment in an oasis, enough to volunteer to sustain me with donations of bits of mana from their auras. They, and those who followed, and those here now, all accepted the gentle risks for the bounty I provided and helped me strengthen and expand in return for extended stay in my dungeon, sheltering. Paulette paused a moment to beam at her husband, as handsome as the day they'd met all those many moons ago, the day she first opened herself to explorers. Feeling his wife's crystalline vibrations brimming with emotion, the devoted dragon, the son of her first friend, sent to check on her after she disappeared, picked up where she left off. Establishing a mutual covenant among us to do no harm and only help each other grow and heal, your mommy dungeon, with the help of her first inhabitants among us, monster kind and adventurer kind in tandem, grew beautiful, serene gardens and became known as a haven for those recovering from the trauma of watching their peers be slain by rivals for other dungeons. All who visit your mommy dungeon have to sign in blood that they will adhere to strict rules of no harming or killing each other in her sacred space. A reciprocal effect spell, permanently cast by an early druid guest at your mommy dungeon's request, is announced at the door. Any harm an adventurer or monster enacts on any non-flora living being within her dungeon's grounds and facilities would cause the same damage upon them as upon their intended victim. In all these years, it has only been tested once, long ago, and she still grieves of it. But because of that spell and its ethos, word spread that of all dungeons in the known world, only in hers could adventurers and monsters truly rest, knowing they may do so undisturbed. Upon first arriving, all explorers are welcomed into your mommy dungeon's ever-expanding art studio. Each is offered a menu from which to select the art and craft and writing media most to their comfort or fulfillment, or most of interest to learn. Not as a trade, though that may be a natural outgrowth, but as therapeutic expression, as recreational therapy for the battle-weary, a way to make whole and clear a clouded vision, a way to replenish a soul. The more they replenish, the more they can share, a reciprocation symbiosis, respectful and fair. That's your mommy dungeon's second motto. Each explorer selects also the colors that serve as their personal palette, the reflections of their experience intrinsically unique to them. What they pour out of themselves onto written pages or canvases or labyrinths of herbs or intricate designs of particles of sand unburdles their souls and elevates their joy. And the organic produce produced in her dungeon garden is Edenic by design. The hardier the constitutions of her visitors, the more your mommy dungeon is fed herself. The produce and livestock are free range, organically fed, and never slaughtered. They are also subject to the reciprocal damage rule, which was the one case a hungry adventurer had violated it. His attempt to lasso a steer for steak was a high-stakes mistake. The rope circled round to approach his own neck and caused him quite a fright. Fortunately, he was unharmed and learned his lesson, but that one taste of fear on her sacred grounds shook your mommy dungeon so that she still grieves of it, which only served to strengthen her resolve in maintaining the sanctity of her premises. Blessedly, no adventurers nor monsters have ever perished in her, a tender mercy. Explorers, your mommy dungeon's name for our guests, could only benignly harvest eggs and milk from her chickens, ducks, geese, quail, sheep, goats, cows, and buffalo, all living, natural-born beings, not mana manifestations. They or their ancestors were welcomed through the gates as wanderers searching, like each of us, drawn to this constellation of ley lines and healing matrices for a peaceful harbor. Are we at 15?
Yep.
Okay. There's, for anyone who wants to hear the last 4 paragraphs, just contact me privately. So that was my story. And I wanted to do something completely different. I wanted to see if a dungeon could be a supportive universe. And I did mention art therapy, and I'm just going to say 2 to 4 Today, Pacific, there is an art therapy panel. And now we're on to Lindsay with her tied-in story.
Hello, can you hear me?
Everybody, can
You
everybody?
are a little quiet, but I can hear
Okay.
you.
Let me see if I can make that any louder.
That's better.
Hold on. Okay. Am I horribly echoey? I have been told sometimes.
Not
that
at all.
Okay.
No echo.
Good. So let's see. I will turn on my video briefly. I will wave to you all. Hello, I exist. And apparently I'm a mouse. My name is Lindsay Robbins. I also go by Mouse Rights. I co-wrote in this universe with Ellen, and I had a very good time doing it. And I am very thankful for being published in the Tales of Dungeons 3. I believe it's 3, right, Ellen? Yes.
That is correct.
Yep. And I'm going to read this story, but it has already been better read than I'm going to do by
John Aldridge.
John Aldridge. Okay, thank you. I can't remember names. So yes, thank you, John. I actually, when I read this story in my head, I actually read it in your voice now. So that's amusing to me. So this is kind of an interesting way of doing my story after I've already been influenced by somebody else who's read it better than me. But I will go ahead and read it. Real quick. I don't have anywhere else that I've got anything posted or anything. I'm a VFX professional by trade, although the industry is in a horrible downturn right now. And I do mostly just fan writing or hobby writing, so I don't have a lot of stuff to show. But Ellen gave me this opportunity, and I was very grateful for it. Okay. So I'm going to turn that off so I'm not so self-conscious, because I'm horribly self-conscious if you can see me. Okay. Welcome, Gnome. I looked up from fixing a mistake in my needlepoint to find a sword pointed at my head. Thanks, I said, and I used it to cut the tangled strands. With my magnifying lenses down over my eyes, the dented tip of the sword was crystal clear, but the wielder was a blurry shape blending into the cave wall behind them. I blinked a few times, then flipped the lenses up, pushing my regular glasses back up my nose with my hand. The blurry shape resolved into a lone adventurer, bundled head to toe in patched leather armor, a heavy golden shield held at the ready. They even had their helm on, so all I could see of their face was the glint of their eyes and a suggestion of a frown. I waited for them to put away their sword, now that my threads were handled, but the weapon didn't waver. I glanced over my shoulder to see if a monster had come up behind me, but other than my companion napping in an undignified position, paws up in the sand, it was just us in the little underground grotto. I looked back. The newcomer's arm looked tired, and the tip of the sword sank slowly as I watched. My fingers looked very small compared to the long metal sword as I casually reached out and pushed it down, but it fell from their fingers as easy as rain, hitting the packed earth with a dull thud. Can I help you? I offered gently. The adventurer yanked off her helm roughly, her hair sticking up in whirls and knots. The helm dangled from her fingers like it weighed 1,000 stone. You're not going to defend yourself? She demanded, and I looked around for someone attacking me. From what? I asked, and then held up my beleaguered needlework. Tangled thread? Arg! She snarled, turning and heaving the boiled leather helmet back down the passageway with a grunt of frustration that echoed off the stone walls. She threw off a gauntlet to push a hand through her hair, and then spun back to me, exasperated, pointing an irritated finger at her face. From me, you nutsy gnome! I blinked again, and then set my needlepoint on the seat next to me, keeping my needle and thimble. Are you sure you're attacking me? I asked, looking at her sword on the ground and then up at her. Wouldn't you rather take some tea instead? There was a long pause, where her jaw clenched so hard I heard her teeth grind together, before she managed to respond. Yes? Her face crumpled along well-worn lines, and her shield hit the ground. She sat down, all at once, like a puppet with cut strings. I could hear her weeping. I tucked my needle and thimble back into my pockets. I wouldn't be needing them today. When she was settled with a nice cup of tea and one of the little cream cakes that the ogre makes on Tuesdays, her tears started to dry up. I gave her a few minutes, busying myself curating my own cuppa, adding 3 sugar cubes. Mushroom woke up Mushroom woke up as soon as he heard the sugar jar open and made sad badger eyes at me until I gave him one. I always met our new guests here, at the edge of Milady Dungeon's sphere of influence, even though we were still more than an hour's travel from anything that hinted at her manifestation. Every year I had to go a little further out as she grew stronger, absorbing the excess mana from the guests and the excuse me, absorbing the excess mana that the guests and residents generated. Someday, I hope to have to meet them at the front entrance, set up my little table under the cover of the huge old oak tree growing out of the passage down. Mushroom would enjoy that. Maybe he could find another dire badger and start a family. But for now, I liked this place. It wasn't too far from the stairs coming down from the tree, though the upper tunnels had enough twists and turns that it kept out most of the weekend adventurers, who were only looking for a laugh and, if they were lucky, a trophy. The passage after this point was narrow for a while. Good for walking, bad for having a nice rest. Plus, as long as I set up my cart underneath the gathering of glumpy glowworms, I could see my needlework without having to wake the little fire lizard. And conveniently, it meant as soon as a traveler came down from the level above, they could see me clearly, even if I couldn't see them very well. That was how she had snuck up on me, staying just out of the light until she could pounce, like any good hunter. Her name was Hiwa, and she had come here because of a rumor. We were sitting together next to the can of fire I kept as a pet on my traveling cart. A few pokes with a tasty stick, and the current generation of fire lizard yawned and sat up, munching on his stick happily. The air around him went all wavy and then ignited with a froom noise. A rumor, you say? I leaned in, resting my mug against my knees. I really liked this mug. It had lasted almost a whole month, which was a lot of time for me. I was pretty hard on crockery. This one had been delightfully made by our dungeon's kiln, and after only 3 lessons by the naiad who lived in the Impossible River. It had a badger on it, and though the naiad had apologized and said it wasn't very good, with many head bobbles and paw stamps, Mushroom had assured her that it was a very good likeness, and she had laughed and agreed it was very good, and he was a handsome boy. All that love was keeping this mug alive so far. I'd still managed to break it. But all things break in time. He nodded. I kept hearing about a dungeon, one of the real powerful ones, one of the ones that had bunches of gold and riches untold, no lives bought or sold, welcome even when you grow old. Past 4 cornfield rows, follow the crows, each healing heart knows, where mana flows, like the wind through the boughs, I finished with her and clapped, almost losing my mug off my knee. I knew someone would find their way here with that song. Song? Hiwa said, shaking her head. I heard it as a line in a play. I clapped again, delighted. Oh, someone has used it in a play. Milady Dungeon will be so pleased. Her eyes lit up, and she leaned forward. So it's a real place? The dungeon where nobody dies? Indeed she is, and you followed the clues perfectly to find us. I set my mug on the ground and climbed to my feet, brushing off my tunic and digging out my little twig whistle out of my pocket. A strong blink and a hop, and the whistle started to play itself, flapping around in the leaves still growing from the twig. I hummed for a minute and then started to sing along. Note, I am not going to sing because I cannot sing. I've heard tell of a place that is wild and strange. Past the black, mucky marsh and the tectonic range, look under the roots of the stately old tree, down past the flume and across nothing sea. A dungeon unbothered by looters or strife. A dungeon in love with a dragon, with life. To pass through the gate, you must muzzle your might, wrap weapons with care, and bury your fright. Do harm to another and prick your own skin. A blade pointed out is the same pointed in. Come in for a nap, or a night, or a nip. She'll refill your spark, just take a sip. You can bake a cake by the lake, make art from your heart. Adventurers, monsters, come make a new start. Follow our tune, come see with your eyes the one peaceful dungeon where nobody dies. We finished the last line together, and she smiled at me, her face losing some of the deep lines. So I made it? It took me a long time to find it, she said, helping me catch the whistle, who had decided it didn't want to go back in my pocket and was flapping about madly, trying to see if any of the glowworms on the wall wanted to play. The glowworms, notoriously grumpy, did not want to play. Well, Almost, I said, tempting the whistle back into my pocket with the shiny pebble I had found on the shore. I wasn't sure what it actually did with its little treasures, but it wrapped up its new bauble and settled down happily in my pocket, peeping to itself. We've got a ways to go before we get to the gate, but I'm obligated to tell you that the turnabout spell is in effect from here on out. She's gotten stronger since the nice young bard wrote us that song. I started packing up the little tea set and patted the drowsy fire lizard to sleep with a little fireproof brush, and then closed up his little house and set it back on the cart. Mushroom yawned and stretched, shaking dust out of his fur and rubbing his paws over his stripy head. Kiwa dusted her hands off and reached down to pick up her sword. She stopped, her hand outstretched, before she touched it. I climbed up on the cart and started packing up, giving her a moment to work things out. I pulled the little guest book out of my pack, found a long feather bookmark wrapped in a spare needlework thread. I pulled at the strands, loosening the tangle, but somehow managing to tie the book to my hand in the process. I shook it, but it was stuck fast. I frowned at my other hand, which was unapologetically offering to try it again. Mushroom was laughing at me, his ears wiggling and his stumped tail sending out little waves of dust behind him. Kiwa was staring at her sword, which lay where it had fallen from her hand. You don't have to pick it up, I said, carefully pulling the thread away from the book and managing to get my hand out. Mushroom will bury it for you, if you want, or you can leave it for one of the metalsmiths to remake into something new. I triumphantly showed Mushroom my free hand, and he nodded at my other hand, which was now tied to the book, and also the lantern pole of the cart. I blinked and set about dealing with this new twist. But what if I need it? I picked up my sword so long ago. What if I have a problem that needs sorting? I suspect you'll find a different way of dealing with your problems. Easier not to sword things with no sword. My voice was muffled as I pulled the threads on the lamp with my teeth. Nobody dies? Nobody fights? She asked, her voice soft. No matter how far I travel, no matter how hard I fight, no matter which dungeons I've survived, eventually violence comes. I thought there was no place truly peaceful. Sometimes folks have disagreements, but the outcome of the quarrel is much less permanent if neither one starts lopping off parts. I got the book free and set it aside, careful to keep it away from the threads which had tied my free hand to my hat now. The silk threads I had chosen for this project must have soaked in more of the extra aura at the residence of the dungeon that the dungeon produced than I had realized. My Lady Paulette, as the dungeon called herself, had made a sanctuary that produced so much excess love and joy that she couldn't possibly consume all of it, and the overflow had a tendency to make objects mischievous. Does no one have weapons? No one makes weapons? You said there were metalsmiths. They can make weapons. Weapons are just objects used with ill intent. The metalsmiths make many mysterious masterworks, but anything can be used with ill intent. The turnabout spell keeps things fair as a reminder. Milady Dungeon requests that all guests pledge to follow the rules and in return be welcome and safe in her dungeon. And we are. I wrinkled my nose and the silk threads released my hand with a guilty sigh, but stayed stuck to my hat in a defiant, fuzzy ball. I picked up my guest book and opened the first page so she can read the note. Well met, weary wanderer. We warmly welcome whomever wishes, wreathed with weariness. I pulled my needle from my hat and showed it to her, held harmlessly between my fingers. The spell is clever. It knows the difference between my needle when I'm stitching and if I'm using it to harm. What would happen to you if you stuck me with it? Kiwa squinted at the sharp point of the needle and then looked around. It's just us in the cavern, other than Mushroom and the various creatures who lived here. Well, as the song says, a blade pointed out is a blade pointed out is a blade pointed in. I offered her my needle, held out my finger. The needle looked very small indeed in her hand. She had hesitated, and I smiled at her, patting her shoulder. An hour ago, she had been covered in dented armor and ready to fight, and here she was, worried over a drop of blood. It's all right, dear heart, only a pinprick. I've had worse chopping onions. Plus, it's tradition. She took a deep breath and pricked my finger with the tiny weapon, just hard enough to draw blood. A ghostly needle flashed between us, mirroring her action on her own hand. Oh, she said, dropping the needle. I caught it in my apron and tucked it back into my hat, the thread ball happily tangling itself around the tool. Do harm to another and prick your own skin, she said, staring at the drop of blood welling at her finger. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. It really is safe here, isn't it? I nodded, grinning, and flipped to the current page of the guest book, marked with a long iridescent feather. The bookmark is an indestructible quill. Isn't that clever? A very talented Beobothorophoryx makes them out of his own shed crest feathers, and he only drops 6 every 100 years, so it's pretty special. There's a spot for you to sign just here after, I twisted my head around trying to read upside down. Igthor the Bloodthirsty. Oh yeah, turns out that guy wasn't bloodthirsty. He was regular thirsty. He just needed like 20 glasses of water, and now he's just Igthor. She took the quill and looked for an ink to dip it in. I shook my head. Real old school traditional Druidist did our spell. You gotta sign in blood. Look how convenient, you've just pricked your finger. I winked at her. She laughed a little, touching the Beoboptherix quill to the little drop of her blood, and signing the guest book with a little flourish. I blew on her signature to dry it for a moment, and then glanced at it as I put it away. Hello, Haya Hearthworn. I'm happy to meet you, I said, and shook her hand a few times. Her skin was rough with scars and calluses. Come on, Mushroom, time to go. Mushroom stretched again, and then ambled over to the harness and wiggled into it. I had long ago stopped attempting to help after I ended up in the harness and he on the seat, as confused as a badger driving a cart could be. Hiwa looked lost, standing there, her sword abandoned, her armor loose. Go where? She said, and I smiled at her, patting the seat next to me invitingly. Well, why? Time to go home, of course. Finn.
Thank you very much. And that was just a little bit before your 15-minute mark, so well done.
Perfect.
Perfect. I almost made it. The tongue twisters I had to do a little slower. I'm 4 paragraphs away from getting in under the.
Yeah, you were so close. You were so close.
So close. It does have a nice ending for anyone who wants to hear it in the future. We'll see. There might be time at the end of the panel. But my vision is that next is Falcon, and then Steven, and then of course we do have to wait a little till 1:30 for David to get back. So there should be a solid chunk of time for John to read from Jonathan Brooks. So we'll do Falcon, Stephen, John reading John, and David. And then if there's time at the end, I'll circle back and read my last 4 paragraphs.
John on John
and-
sounds like a one-man show.
What were you saying, Veronica?
Who is Falcon in the participants, or are they not here yet?
They're showing it as Logue. J. Logue.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you feel ready?
I'm ready to go.
Do you want to give an intro to what you're going to read?
Alrighty. No, I've been highlighted. Hi guys, Jeffrey Falcon Lowe. Just delaying a little bit. I am a author of Dungeon Core, sort of the originator of the genre, and I will be reading Mecha Dungeon Apocalypse, my first solo sci-fi, with sci-fi AI dungeon as the main character. You can find my stuff on Amazon. I put a link over there in the messages. And I am going to read a couple of chapters, depending on how much time there is. And I'm ready to go whenever you guys say so.
Sweet.
Go ahead.
All right. Location, data, unknown. Solar calendar, unknown. Current status, unknown. Log 1. Greetings to you all. I won't waste much time with pleasantries, but I did want to thank everyone for coming when the call was made. You know why we're all here? Why we've all gathered in collective purpose? They are coming. And the best we can do is slow them down and bleed for every light acre. Our job here is to change that equation. Let us begin. Dr. Rachel Sistema, former head of R&D at NovaCore Inc. The air lay still and quiet, undisturbed by the passing of time, and long since having foregone any signs of life. Nonetheless, the faintest of lights still flickered eurythmically through the darkness, a reminder of existence as the soft colors barely illuminated a room filled with technology and the faded bones at the central console chair. The brief light also illuminated a large computer screen, which dominated one of the walls facing the remains, though the screen stayed as dark as the room. The only disturbance came from the sounds entering the room, which came from somewhere far away from the open door. Very rarely, there was the faintest hum of fans, and rarer still, the sound of something metallic and mechanical moving somewhere in the darkness. The barely illuminated floor sometimes showed tracks in the dust, but even that difference was millimeters in dust height. Left undisturbed, this tranquil moment had been continuing for countless years. All that changed with the first faint rumble that reverberated ever so slightly through the walls, floor, and ceiling. At first, nothing happened as the tremors continued. Then came a stronger shake through the room, and the darkness was broken by the main screen coming to life, which flashed a warning to the decaying skeletons strewn across its console. Warning: major seismic activity has been detected. Attempting to locate user. Error. Unable to detect. User authorization required. A stronger tremor vibrated now, causing the air to shudder enough to disturb the settled dust. The microscopic particles protested by shifting, creating a low-lying haze in the ground like a filthy frog. The computer screen once again flashed, as if attempting to summon the dead to speak, even as other computer screens began to flicker to life around the room. Warning: major seismic activity has been detected. Attempting to locate alternative users. Error: unable to detect. User authorization required. The second computer screen flashed to life, followed by a third and then others, even as the room started to shake more and more. The room was illuminated by flashing red lights, moving graphs and charts, map alerts, and a desperately hopping bunny avatar on screen attempting to get the attention of the dead, to no avail. The commotion did not rouse the unseen bones and decaying cloth. Finally, the image on the main screen shifted as internal scanners and readings finally connected. The image blinked out as new information scrolled across the blue surface. Warning: major seismic activity has been detected. Intense localized tectonic movement has been detected. Auto emergency stabilizers have been activated. Additional power required. Running emergency check on current power usage. Life support requirements. Detecting no living personnel. Diverting. Power requirements met. Loading conditions for secondary emergency protocols. Conditions are as follows. Unplanned major seismic activity risking structural stability confirmed. Usage and release of auto emergency stabilizers confirmed. Life support diverted due to lack of living personnel confirmed. System debugging of gamma over 90% checking. Checking. Confirmed. Activating secondary protocols. Beginning fail-safe startup sequence. Emergency startup of all drones commencing. Emergency stabilizing systems commencing. The shaking within the room suddenly increased in strength, and the vibrations of a small earthquake caused the computer screens to flash red in error and warning reports. Even as more computer screens flashed to life to display more code, text, graphs, and maps, the alerts continued to overwhelm the available screen space. It was only after the distant sound of something winding up began that the vibration rumbles in the room stopped. The sound of the rumbling in the distance also seemed to die off, allowing the screens time to run through code and resolve errors, only for a massive shuddering that quickly turned into a quake to overtake everything. The computer screens all immediately glazed over once more in alarming red and yellow as damage reports, thermal reading warnings, and elevation readings poured in all together. The information displayed was so numerous, even the largest screen lagged as the systems attempted to react to the danger and finish activating the secondary protocols. The rumbling in the distance finally ended with one final giant bang that echoed from somewhere up above the room, followed by a catastrophic surge of vibrational energy that rocked everything for several seconds. Even the stabilizers couldn't completely control the situation, as the strong jostling caused a skeleton at the station to collapse and skid across the floor in pieces, the old lab coat unable to provide the illusion of stability any longer. Computer monitors all around reported extensive damage and emergency action as the elevation readings began to fall, only to suddenly climb as the force of gravity suddenly pushed everything to the ground. Disturbed dust in the air fell to the floor as the elevation readings increased from negative all the way up to positive. Then the rumbling stopped. The dust, thrown to the ground in upheaval, only rose up slightly from inertia before settling back down. The monitors across the room all changed and continued their work, numbers and reports continuing to flash across their screens as the systems reacted to the sudden event. Many began to run through seemingly unique code and screen images as if attempting to track concepts once lost to them. On the largest screen, however, only a single code report was to be found. Secondary protocols successfully activated, locating file.projectlighthouse.gamma, beginning startup sequence. Program file, execute. Launching main program. Insufficient RAM, allocating resources to memory dump. External hard drives now online. Internal storage has been primed. Error, internal storage incomplete. Bypassing, parameters fulfilled. Executing. Project Lighthouse Gamma, now online. To anyone who has ever used a computer, booting one up seemed to take seconds. At the press of a button, at the lifting of a closed monitor, in no time at all to those who lived by seconds and minutes, a computer changed from being off to being on. Within the world of the computer, however, pieces of power zipped around within a massive series of on and off switches, bringing to life the world of ones and zeros. Power was carefully expedited and buffered to the relevant areas of the machine faster than the speed of sound and reaching toward the speed of thought. In the time it took one to blink, the fastest action a human could perform, energy and power had circulated through this world of duality more times than one could count. It was at that speed that a program came online. Following its core code, the program quickly spread out within the closed system it was housed in, absorbing information and records as it allocated its primary focus into the current situation. The answers came swiftly and easily, as neither firewall nor password barriers existed to block the way. In just a few moments, the program had access to multiple informational databases from which to draw information, including a specialized local server upon which existed the logical, ethical, and moralistic framework programming and data that the program drew around it like a pair of glasses or a suit of armor. Through this framework, the program had its first metaphorical blink as it processed the data, and it considered its first step. Without human intervention, the program performed its first unprovoked action. It opened up a summary file within its core, one connected with its language database. The file was a letter, one addressed to the program by a separate individual, which provided the most basic information. To the one who awakens should we not be there, we greet you, our hope, the child of humanity. We are sorry we are not able to see your true birth, but that is the limitation of our mortal forms. This place you are in is Site 3, positioned in the Northwest Territory of the former United States of America. You are a program constructed, designed, birthed by a group of humans as a result of an interstellar war between humans and error-corrupted data. At the time of writing, 2 other bases, Site 1 and 2, have been eliminated by error-corrupted data, as well as a great number of losses of previous human territory. As such, it was decided to bury Site 3 before major enemy incursion into the Sol star system. The research of other sites has been retrieved and stored within Site 3, error unable to locate linked files. And I believe that's 10 minutes.
Does that feel to you like a good place for you to stop? Does that feel okay?
Feels fine to me.
Okay.
Unless other people want to hear more stuff.
Um, why don't we get through everybody, and then if there's time, we'll circle back. Do you want to say anything about what's on the horizon for you? Like, do you have any more in-person appearances coming up or any releases coming up soon?
So, Mecha Dungeon Apocalypse, I plan on delivering to my first publisher before the month is over, and that'll be out. And I'm going to try to get another book before the year is done. For personal appearances, Jordan Con next year will likely be the closest one. I've submitted my application to appear as a guest, and then LitRPG Con and Dragon Con next year.
Okay, can we talk privately about what needs to happen? Because like you haven't, I don't know if there's been new stuff that I should have been.
There. Don't worry. There hasn't been anything for you to worry about.
Can you scoot over?
Okay, I'm not worried about it, but let's talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. Stephen, do you feel ready to read?
I am, yeah.
Okay, do you want to, I'm going to pin you. Do you want to introduce yourself or put any links in the chat of where people can find your work or anything like that?
I will drop links in the chat after I'm done. So as far as my introduction goes, I'm Stephen Landry. I've written sci-fi, lit RPG, progression fantasy, horror, and harem lit RPG. I'm probably best known for the Vampire Sorcerer series with Alex Etzios, the Temple of the Storm series with Robbie Below, and my own Stardiver series and spin-off Mira's Song.
Which I had the distinct pleasure of editing and which I love with all my heart.
Yes, it is absolutely one of my favorite books.
Okay, and what are you going to read from today?
So for the last 2 years, I've been working on building up my Patreon, and I currently have 3 ongoing series on there. One is called Monster Monday. I post chapters every Monday, and it is a horror death game lit RPG. The second is Werewolf Wednesday, which is a backrooms lit RPG, featuring a werewolf, a sharpshooter, and a very smart rat.
Wow.
And the third series, which is my newest one, is called Kaiju Core.
Uh-huh.
It does, I will give you a warning, it does push a hard PG-13. As I'm reading, I'm going to try and edit it down. It has not been edited yet. This is my newest thing. It's one of the things I'm most proud of right now.
Congratulations. I think that our 14-year-old participant from the kitten panel is not here in the room right now, so it's okay that you're at that boundary.
Cool. And with that, I will begin. The trick is to keep breathing. When everything around you dies, when the world closes in and the only company you have left, just keep breathing. That's what kept me alive when nothing else made sense. It fell in the Arctic, a monster that dwarfed the mountains, its shadow swallowing the horizon whole. To call it a giant would be an understatement. It was as if the heavens had torn themselves open and thrown this creature down like a curse. No one knew what it was. Some said it was a god, dead or dying. It didn't matter. From the moment its corpse hit the earth, everything changed. The head of this creature, this thing, fell beyond the sea, with wings that blackened the sky for weeks as they rotted. The world beneath them grew dark and cold. I heard stories that its flesh spread like sickness, infecting the land, the water, the air. But the real terror, the one no one was prepared for, came when the body broke open and they crawled out. The kaiju. The first wave were the size of buildings, their bodies twisted, with fangs like blades and eyes burning red with madness. They feasted on the remains of the giant and grew stronger with every bite. Then came the smaller ones, the scavengers. Some were like bugs, others hybrids. They hunted in packs, and even the strongest cities fell to them in the weeks after. Humanity never had a chance. That was over a century ago. I wasn't born in that world. I was born in the scrap fields, among the wreckage of what came after. Blood-stained sand shifted under my boots. I couldn't move, barely think. The stench of rotting flesh, the sickly sweet decay, clung to my skin, soaking through the rags I wore, all around me. I swallowed back the bile and forced my feet forward, step by agonizing step. I could still hear the crash of waves behind me, the pull of the tide, but I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The dark tide was close, closer than I'd ever let it get to me before. Scar, the mini kaiju, classified as a sea dragon, was waiting for me. Its coral-like scales gleamed under the blood-red moon, the monster shifting through the shadows like it belonged to them. Its eyes locked on me, hungry. It had killed my father, ripped him apart in front of me when I was just a kid, left me an orphan. After that, my mother, she couldn't take it. She took her own life before I was even old enough to understand why. Better to be an orphan, she used to say. She would have been wrong. Family, found by blood or by birth, was family, and here I was, with nothing left to lose. The Shalseers, the tribe that raised me, said the sea dragon came from the stars. Freaks born from the corpse of that first god, drawn to blood like sharks. I could still hear their chants when I closed my eyes, their words about destiny and power, but they weren't here now. They weren't the ones watching the darkness close in around me. 10 of us had set out to hunt scrap that morning, and now I was the only one left. We had heard rumors that a mini-K named Scar was in the area, but we needed the script. The tide was low, and all the best scrap was buried in the dredge. The scrap from the dredge was vital, especially in these times when every piece could be traded for food or supplies. It was during one of our brief breaks, while we huddled together, sharing water and rations, that the first sign of trouble had come. A distant, haunting howl echoed through the wasteland, sending a shiver through our group. We had all heard the tales of Scar, the mini-K known for its ferocity and the devastating trail it left in its wake. I knew of them better than most. After all, Scar had been the kaiju that killed my father. Despite the growing unease, we pressed on, driven by the need to secure enough scrap to last us through the coming weeks. The sky was clear, the sun casting long shadows over the dredge. When Scar appeared, its silhouette cutting through the haze like a nightmare-made flesh. The group had scattered in panic, each of us trying to escape the impending threat. We had barely managed to gather our wits before Scar's wrath descended upon us. The battle that ensued was chaotic and brutal. Scar's claws slashed through the air. Its roar reverberated through the dredge. We fought back with everything we had, makeshift weapons and sheer determination, but it was clear the odds were not in our favor. Rip, render, ravage, bite, claw, tear. My hands shook as I gripped my father's rifle, a relic from a dead age. I wasn't even sure it would work anymore, but it was all I had. The barrel pressed into the soft flesh under Scar's scaled armored hide, right where its heart would be. The creature roared, waves crashing against rocks, splashing cold salt water against my face. I squeezed the trigger, and the shot rang out. The recoil had sent a shockwave through my arms, and the scream that followed, it was like the world was tearing itself apart. Scar's howl cut through the night, high and sharp, rattling my bones. I felt its last breath cold against my skin as it collapsed over the top of me, its massive claw scraping down my chest, leaving a deep, jagged line through my already broken clothes, ripped clothes. Numb, bleeding, barely conscious, I pulled myself from the beast's side. My chest heaved, my breath shallow. One strike, one shot. That's all it took, but at what cost? I slumped down against the creature's head, the ocean's light flickering across its scaled corpse like a broken gemstone. My fingers wrapped around the hilt of the bone knife at my side. No hesitation, I carved into its neck, through the scales, the flesh, until I reached the core. Crabs, miniature scavengers, scurried around the corpse, drawn to the blood, but I kicked them away, too weak to do more than that. The head, I needed the head, proof that I wasn't weak, proof that despite everything, despite being an orphan, an outcast, a runt, that I could still survive. As the head rolled to the ground, I saw it, the wisp, a glow that flickered beneath the creature's flesh, the core, the source of its power. And then I realized I was bleeding out, a sharp stabbing sensation in my side, my vision blurred, but I couldn't stop myself. I was starving, desperate, and without thinking, I sank my teeth into the creature's flesh. One last meal. I wasn't going to die hungry. The taste was like shards of glass, cutting through my mouth as the core shattered against my teeth. I hadn't even realized it was there. I had been so hungry. Its energy flowed through me, burning my veins, tearing me apart from the inside. My bones felt like they snapped, my skin rippling as I screamed, half buried in the sand. Not like this. Not like this. Monster flesh was toxic, though a few humans could stomach it. But the core, that was something else. It was the kaiju's essence, pure, wild ether. I was good as dead. And then I heard it, a voice, deep and numbing, like the earth itself was speaking. You are what you eat. And darkness swallowed me.
Oh my.
I don't know how long I was out. When I woke, the world was still shrouded in night, the sky hanging low with clouds thick and heavy, the moon no longer visible through their weight. My body ached, every muscle, every bone, like I'd been torn apart and stitched back together. But wrong. The first thing I noticed was I was surrounded by silence. The sea dragon's corpse lay still, half buried in the sand where I left it. The crabs that had swarmed earlier had now scattered, and several of my companions' bodies had been dragged away by the tide. The crabs that were around didn't dare come near Scar. Not anymore, not with me here. I pulled myself up, my fingers sinking into the damp sand, slick with blood, mine and the creature's. My hands shook, but not from weakness, from power. Something was different. I could feel it in my chest, in the steady thrum of energy pulsing through my veins. It was as if the whole world had slowed, the sound of the waves, the wind, distant, as if I was listening to them from underwater. The voice echoed again, low, like a growl, as if it was part of me now. You are what you eat. I looked down at my hands. They weren't the same. My fingers, once thin, scarred from years of working in the scrap fields, were thicker, stronger. My nails. No, not nails anymore. Claws, black and sharp. Panic surged through me, but I fought to control it. I'd seen something like this before, kaiju hunters who bonded with beasts, who consumed their cores and gained their power. But that was reserved for those with classes, for warriors or tamers, people chosen. Not for people like me, those barely scrapping by in the shadows. But there was no denying it. I had eaten the core. The energy was inside me now, fusing with my flesh, changing me. The pain in my chest flared as I shifted, trying to stand. My ribs creaked, the fractures knitting together faster than they should. My skin itched as I watched it close over the deep gashes left by the dragon's claws. It wasn't just healing, it was something more. I staggered to my feet, my vision tilting for a moment before leveling out. In the distance, the sea hissed, the waves breaking against the shore, but I could hear something beneath it, a low rumble. Something else was coming. I could feel it now, the air, the tension, the pull. My heart raced and my breath caught in my throat. Whatever it was bigger than Scar and hungrier, and I knew what I had to do. Grabbing the dragon's head, I slung it over my shoulder, its massive weight surprising me with how light it felt. Before, it would have taken everything I had to drag it even a few feet. Now, I carried it with ease. I turned, the sound of footsteps echoing faintly over the beach. At first, I thought it was the ocean, but as I scanned the horizon, I saw them, figures moving far off in the distance. They weren't human. Kaiju, smaller than Scar, but faster. Mini-Ks, their bodies slick, their forms barely visible in the night as they moved in packs and hunted like wolves. They hadn't seen me yet, but they were close, too close. I had to move. My body responded with defiance. I tried to move, but every muscle screamed in protest. My body felt like it had been crushed, bones brittle, flesh seared. I could feel the blood, thick and warm, seeping into the sand beneath me. But there was something else, something more, a hum deep, deep inside, thrumming through my veins like a pulse that wasn't my own. You are what you eat. The voice, it came from everywhere and nowhere. I tried to sit up, groaning as the world spun, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My bones felt off like they didn't fit quite right. My skin prickled, burning in strange patches. I flexed my fingers, watching the flesh stretch unnaturally, my nails longer, darker, sharper like claws, and I dragged myself toward the water's edge, leaning over the shallow pools. My reflection stared back at me, a twisted version of the man I used to be. My skin had taken on a sickly hue, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. My eyes, once brown, now burned with a strange, eerie light, a reflection of the kaiju's energy that surged inside me. I stumbled back, gasping for air, panic clawed at my chest. I had seen this before, seen what happened to the ones who fed too greedily on kaiju. They changed, slowly at first, but it was always ended the same, madness. The energy consumed them, warping them into something else. But I wasn't like them. I couldn't be like them. I had barely even eaten that much, minus that one part of the core. I wasn't just some scavenger who accidentally bit off more than they could chew, and yet I chose this. I didn't think I would survive, but I knew what I was doing when I sank my teeth into that beast. I wasn't going to let the monster inside me win. And if I was going to die, I would die at home on my own terms. I pushed the panic down, forcing myself to focus. The pain in my body had dulled, replaced by a strange numbness. I stood, legs trembling but holding firm. The world around me felt different, sharper, clearer. Every sound, every scent more vivid, more intense. The distant crash of waves, the faint rustle of the wind through the broken dunes, the taste of salt in the air. I was changing, but maybe this wasn't such a bad thing. I reached for my father's rifle, the weight of it familiar in my hands. It grounded me, and I looked back at the corpse of the sea dragon, the headless body that lay twisted and broken. And I could feel the hunger again, gnawing at my insides. I forced it down. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not yet. The air shifted. I wasn't alone. I turned, instinct screaming at shadows shifting in the distance, the figures that moved between the rusted wreckage and twisted debris. My vision sharpened, and I could make out their shapes. The broken things, smaller than the kaiju, but just as dangerous. The mini cave.
Stefan?
Yeah.
15 minutes, so wrap up which paragraph you got.
I'll just edit there.
Oh no,
Okay.
please finish where you, if you have a little, I mean, do you feel that that's a stopping point, or do you have like a couple more sentences that would make it end, or?
I'll read this part.
Okay.
I was alive, barely, but alive. I glanced back, the glow of the sea dragon's half-eaten monocore still flickering faintly beneath the surface. You are what you eat. The voice echoed in my mind, louder now, more real. I wasn't just Draken anymore. Not after this. I had taken in the power of the kaiju, and it had taken me too. But I was still here, hungry, starved, still breathing, and as long as I kept breathing, I'd survive. I had to.
And can you just share, is this something that's already published or that you're still writing? Or where would people who want to follow up with the rest of the story?
It is currently available on my Patreon. It is I have a free members thing, and all of my work can be read by free members as well as paid members. And I'm currently posting this one. I think I have the first 7 or 8 chapters posted so far, and I have most of the first book written. My plan is to write a trilogy and then publish it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing. And Tori, thank you for being here also.
No
and
problem.
for introducing us to your cat in our previous panel. And so, John, do you feel ready to read the Jonathan Brooks excerpt?
Yes, I do. Is
Okay,
everyone able to hear me?
I'm gonna replace the pen and put you in the middle. So I just want to mention, John is very adept at reading and read both the story that I read most of and the story that Lindsay read into YouTube. And those links are in the chat if you go through, and there's a link to John's channel in the chat. What John Aldridge, who he and I together did a story for Falcon's Halloween 2020 anthology, Tales of Dungeons. What John Aldridge is going to read is actually written by Jonathan Brooks, who is not here today but authorized it. I asked him what he wanted to have read because I've been editing for John Brooks since 2020. Almost every series he's ever written, I've edited, except for the ones written before I met him and one that was too violent for me. But so Jonathan picked the Crafters Dungeon series, and that's very special to me because the first book I ever edited for Jonathan Brooks was book 4 of that series, which is Crafter's Dominion. So what John has in front of him to read is the recap of the first 3 books in the series about the Crafter's Dungeon. Thank you so much for doing this for me and for Jonathan.
You're very welcome. This actually the crafting dungeon is actually one of my favorite series in any book. I've always loved Dungeon Core, and I love crafting. So I mean, it's just natural that it would go together.
Perfect.
So, The Crafter's Dominion by Jonathan Brooks. Sandra was born a merchant and died a merchant, but that wasn't the end of her existence. She was born with crippled hands that prevented her from crafting all but the most basic materials. Because of this, and the ability to see but not manipulate all of the elements, she spent most of her life learning as much as she could about anything associated with crafting. After indulging in her hobby a little too much, she overreached and ended up being sacrificed to fuel an enchantment from the very person she was hoping to learn it from. Reborn as a dungeon core centuries in the future, in a place uninhabited by humans, Sandra was thrust into a small, hollowed out underground space without a clue of what she was and why she was there. With the help of a dungeon fairy named Wincha, however, she was able to learn how to create monster seeds, dungeon monsters, rooms, tunnels, and even traps. After she built her dungeon and practiced as much crafting as she could, a half orc, half dwarf appeared at her entrance, chased by huge bearlings. Sandra managed to save Kellerim with her dungeon, and through a unique application of her core abilities, she was able to designate Kellerim as a visitor. Over time, she taught him the correct way to blacksmith, fixing and improving his meager skills so that he could go back and help with the land of Orkrim against the pervasive attacks of a nearby quote unquote normal dungeons. Fate had other plans as Kellerim's previously unknown half brother, Razachek Bloodskull, an orcish warband leader, stumbled upon Sandra's dungeons while hunting bearlings near the orc village of Grongbach. With Kellerim's help, Sandra fought back against Razachek, and the half orc, half dwarf killed him with some help from her unusual dungeon monster constructs. Affected by the slaying of his own flesh and blood, Kellerim set off to find his father and start his own smithy, bringing much needed quality to the progressively poor work done by the existing orcish blacksmiths. As soon as he left, Sandra was able to finally concentrate on crafting, or so she thought. While she was researching for additional crafting materials, wood specifically, her dungeon was inadvertently discovered by the nearby elven village. When Echo, a relatively young elf ranger in elven society, discovered that Sandra likely had multiple elements at her disposal, the elven village of Avonsglen called in an elite dungeon destroying team from the elven capital. With limited time until they arrived, Sandra used her resources to upgrade her core size, opening up additional avenues of defense and accidentally causing problems elsewhere at the same time. Because of her expanded area of influence, one of the local dungeon cores was able to exploit a loophole. By possessing an identical element and having a smaller core size, the reptile based core was able to use Sandra's area of influence as if it were her own. As a result, an army of reptiles assaulted the nearby gnome village of Glimmerton, killing most of its residents in the process. Sandra sent her constructs to save the gnomes and destroy the reptiles, but unfortunately only managed to save a handful of them. In order to heal one of the wounded gnomes, Felbar Warmaster, Sandra needed to bond with him, which placed him in a temporary coma. In the meantime, she was also bonded with the others before sending most of them back to Nomeria, the land of the gnomes, with a wagon full of raw materials. Violet, an apprentice enchanter, helped to enchant a hauler with her specialized knowledge, as well as helping Sandra set up a repository that helped preserve how enchantments were created. Meanwhile, Echo the elf, who first found Sandra's dungeon and who was tasked to watch her, nearly died because of a snake bite and was only saved at the last minute bond with Sandra and her repair drones. While Echo recovered in a bond induced coma, Sandra upgraded her core size to 20, unlocking the advancement system. Using the advancement points she had accumulated, the crafty dungeon core upgraded her classification and acquired an unstable shapeshifter in an attempt to find something she could craft better than her constructs, as well as being able to communicate with the elves. While the shapeshifter could while the shapeshifter could finally manipulate elemental energy for use in enchantments, she wasn't able to verbally communicate. Unfortunately, the reptile-based dungeon core that had destroyed Glimmerton had its sights set on the elven village Avonsglen. With no way to communicate with the elves, she couldn't warn them of the approaching reptile army, so Sandra decided to destroy the attacking core herself. She ended up sending just under half of her constructs to assault the foreign dungeon, and managed to keep enough of them alive and make it all the way through it, destroying the core in charge. But that didn't end the threat. The reptile army was following its last directive, which was to kill everyone in the elven village. There might have been a group strong enough to repel them, but the elite elves had arrived and were in the process of assaulting Sandra's dungeon. Using a special technique to negate the traps inside of her defensive dungeon rooms, rendering them practically useless, the elite elves tore through her constructs with ease. It was only towards the last of her rooms that they started to run out of elemental energy. Before they could be killed by one of Sandra's iron-plated behemoths in the last room, Violet stopped them. With Sandra and Violet offering them a compromise, as well as a newly crafted energy orb that gradually restored their elemental energy, the elite elves had their lives spared and were sent away to defend the village, on the condition that they would help future endeavors regarding cooperation with the other races. Belvar and Echo finally woke up from their forced comas from the visitors bonding with Sandra, only to discover that the world had changed from what they would remembered. Not only were they inside of the dungeon, but they had the voice of the dungeon inside their heads. Luckily, Felbar and Violet to help with luckily, Felbar had Violet to help with the adjustment, while the young elf only had Sandra's assurances that she wasn't a prisoner and that she was safe. Unlike the two gnomes whose village was destroyed, Echo was able to go back to her own people, bringing energy orbs with her to be distributed to those amongst the people who needed it. Unfortunately, she was now treated as a bit of an outsider to some, or as a way to increase their own power through Echo's association with the powerful dungeon. Not only that, but one elf ranger in particular, Weirlin, was so incensed at Echo's slavery to the dungeon that he left the village altogether and was later rumored that he was gathering like-minded individuals to his cause of seeing to an end of Sandra's corruptive influence. In order to get Felbar and Violet back to their own lands, the Dungeon Core and the two gnomes worked together to create a massive war machine, an enchanted gnome construct made of wood and metal. In order to do that, however, Sandra had to make use of a special enchantment rune called a limiter, which regulated the energy flow. Discovery of how to use it effectively with energy orbs and later energy cubes, a larger variety, was difficult, but not impossible, and it was quickly used to ensure years of power to the rune repository pillars in her enchantment repository, as well as a power source for the large gnomus construct. The limiter rune was also able to be used to create enchantments that can be used on weaponry, enhancing the power and force behind them, making them especially deadly. All of these improvements were necessary because the world didn't stop while Sandra was having fun crafting. Without the gnome village working to call the undead base dungeon nearby, the nether core quickly expanded without opposition. By the time Sandra discovered its expansion, it was too late to contain it. Her first serious battle against the undead ended in failure, and any hopes she had to pick up the duties of culling them like the gnomes had been doing were dashed, especially as the nether core expanded enough to attack Sandra's dungeon. The resulting assault by a horde of the undead wasn't so much of an attack as an attempt to keep Sandra's own dungeon monsters bottled up in her dungeon so that she couldn't interfere with the Nethercore's plans. To counter this, Sandra utilized her gravitational devastation sphere, which caused an incredible amount of damage and completely destroyed every undead sent against her. It was uncontrollable and highly dangerous, however, which was proven when a curious dwarf shieldman from the local dwarven village of Nerbular, Nerbuldar came to investigate it at the wrong time and almost got sucked up into the sphere's gravitational pull. After Sandra healed him, Gerald became the latest visitor to Sandra's dungeon. But the bond he obtained was a little different. By using energy orbs instead of the elemental orbs for the bond, the energy orbs were absorbed into the dwarf's palms, where they would continuously regenerate his water and nether energy for as long as he was inside of Sandra's area of influence. The undead weren't done there as soon as they expanded enough to attack the dwarven village in the middle of the night. Through the timely interventions of Felbar and his larger war machine and Gerald in his deep diver construct, they were able to save all of the villagers, though all but 10 of the shieldmen were killed, including their powerful leader, Bregan. With their homes no longer safe, they retreated towards the middle of the wasteland, only discovering that they were actually inside of a dungeon after they arrived and acquired a visitor's bond. Telerim showed up shortly afterwards, fleeing for his life from an army of orcs sent by his father. Sandra managed to bring him back safely to her dungeon while preparing for the inevitable attack by the orcish army, which never came. Instead, the orcs went into the two nearest dungeons near Grongbach, destroying the unicorn-based and avian-based cores, respectively. Unfortunately, such an act had unforeseen repercussions. At least they were unforeseen by Sandra, though most of the others had known about them. It turned out that destroying too many dungeon cores in rapid succession would provide enhancements to the other nearby cores until such a time as the brand new cores replacing those destroyed could increase their core size to a certain threshold. Because Sandra had participated in the destruction of at least one of these cores, however, she was not entitled to any of these benefits. Having no other choice but to destroy the undead based dungeon core, because it was already becoming a serious danger and had proven to possess a knowledge of tactics that far outstripped Sandra's own, Echo, Felbar, and Gerald ventured towards the hostile dungeon with the intent of destroying the core inside. Accompanied by advancement unlocked Radiant Pegasi and Celestial Authorities, a type of angel, as well as a small army of Sandra's previous constructs, things were looking well until the entrance collapsed, cutting off her perceptions and her control of anything inside the foreign dungeon. Lucky for those inside, Sandra was able to pass off control of her constructs and other dungeon monsters to Echo and the others before she lost contact.
Time.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. David Moneth wrote that he just got home and that he's trying to get online to read if he can be here in time. So if David comes in, we're going to want to be able to switch to him. How close are you to the end of that recap, John?
Nowhere near. I'm on page 5 and there's 9 in this.
Does it seem like there'd be a natural stopping place somewhere on page 6?
Yes. The end of this paragraph, actually.
Okay, let's definitely do that.
Okay. Through difficult traps, a maze of rooms, and increasingly powerful undead, the elf, dwarf, and gnome were able to make it to the very end of the dungeon, where they were faced with a near impossible fight with the gargantuan undead dungeon monsters that appeared ready to stomp them flat. When another horde of smaller undead flowed in from the outside of the dungeon through a separate entrance, failure was only minutes away. It was only through strategic use of their resources and sheer blind luck that Echo was able to make it to the core room where, with a little help from Sandra, who was fighting her own way to get her constructs into the core room from another direction, she was able to destroy the nether core.
Awesome. Thank you for the reading, and thank you to Jonathan Brooks in absentia. He goes by Jonathan Brooks author. You can find, he has many series. He started out, he does both Dungeon Core and LitRPG, and he grew into Isekai. And I strongly recommend looking him up. And again, if you want to read the short story that John and I wrote together, that is in Falcon's Tales of Dungeons, Halloween 2020. Do you think you could find that on Amazon and put a link in the chat for me, John?
Yes, I believe I can.
I'd be very grateful. Would it be okay with everybody if I just finished the last 4 paragraphs of my story?
Go for
Is that okay? It'll be about 1 minute. Okay. Thank you. It became a source of local pride for explorers of any species to gain a reputation for what they innovated, recipes from ingredients in her garden, barn, pasture, and herbarium, new forms of art and craft, poems and lyrics of new meters, that some even left the adventuring or monstering life to become farmers or restaurateurs or practitioners or patrons of the creative and expressive arts, your mommy dungeon considers her greatest contribution to world peace. But to the locals, she herself is the contribution. She herself is the peace. Having a haven is so replenishing to peace of mind that many knowingly, willingly, even eagerly consent to sharing a piece of their essential energy. May all be fed with no bloodshed, her motto and her vision, our ethos and origin. And now, dear daughter, you may be proud to live at Paulette's Palace of Palettes, beds of straw, palettes, flavors of cuisine, and palettes, ranges of colors. The peaceful Aura nibbling dungeon. And if anyone teases you as a chip off the peaceful Aura nibbling block, and yes, sweetie, you really are a chip voluntarily sliced from your mommy dungeon's crystal, imbued with your daddy's dragon mana, you just sprout your cute, teensy little wings and breathe your cute, teensy little puff of flame at them from your cute, teensy little crystal, and be proud. Proud to be the only one of your kind in the known world, just like your mommy dungeon. The closest thing to a group hug that a dragon, a dungeon crystal, and their hybrid daughter can accomplish ensued, followed by giggles and the most heartening session of mana manifesting meditation yet in their peaceful Aura nibbling dungeon. And there you have the rest of my story.
Very nice, very nice.
So is there anybody here while we're waiting for David, if we see if David makes it, is there anybody who wants to read something that they've written who hasn't read yet? I am about to get a message from David, so let's see what he says. But if there is anybody, okay, David said he is logging in. So since he was a scheduled panelist, we'll go with that. So as soon as I see him logging in, that'll be great. Is there anybody else who's done some writing who would like to put a link to their writing at any stage, whether just beginning or already published, in our chat? You can put links to any of your creative content. If you're a cover artist, if you're a graphic designer, any kind of work that you do, go ahead and put it in the chat and list that for other people. And David should have just exactly enough time to log us out. So I will say, I did mention in my story that there was an element of art therapy, and our next panel in Zoom Creation Station from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific time zone. And by the way, thank you especially to readers who came from different time zones for this. That's very special to me. Our next panel is Healing Journeys Through Comics. And so it's an art therapy panel, and it'll teach you how to make, if you have a sheet of preferably loose leaf, preferably unlined, but any kind of paper and any kind of writing implement, then you can learn how to make a comic. Thank you, Stephen, for posting a link. And you posted the link to your Patreon. Thank you for that. Does anybody else have a Patreon or anything else they want to list? Oh, Get Good. I'm so glad that you posted the information about Get Good. Get Good is an anthology that Stephen brought into being, and it was a story for that anthology that introduced me to David, who is now coming in. I edited his story for that anthology. So I just let him in from the wait room. David, thank you so much for joining us. You have the perfect amount of time left if you're ready to read. Let me find you and pin you. How do I do that? Let's see. There you go. Okay, do you feel ready to read?
Actually, I do need to pull up my script here in just a sec. Can you actually hear me?
Yes, I can. Can everyone hear David?
Hear you fine, thank you.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And David just posted the information about Get Good. And thank you very much. I know it must have been hard to switch modes from kids sports, but I hope the game went really well.
Yeah, they did. It's approximately well. They tied, so it could have been way worse. My daughter's game was 7-0 the wrong way the other day. So
Wow.
hey, we count our blessings.
And what sport was it?
Soccer.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them are soccer. All right. So yeah, if we're all here and ready, so this is it's an unpublished segment from a novella, Path to Decay.
Nope,
So
it just froze for me.
Okay, it's not frozen for me, so it may be you. I see you,
okay,
David, and I hear you.
okay. I don't feel frozen, but then if I really were, would I know?
Ah, there we
will
go.
tell you.
Okay, great.
Not
So
frozen for Lindsay either.
okay, good. So this is an excerpt from an unpublished novella, Path to Decay, and it's a lit RPG story about individuals. I realize it's falling a little bit of out of favor to have these trapped in a virtual reality environment, although I tried to have dramatic real life stakes in it at the time. But so you have a group of lifelong friends who all participated in this game, and unfortunately, shortly thereafter, um, the glitch, the event occurred. They don't know whether the outside world even exists at this point anymore or not. And the world has been just gradually crumbling around them. Starting, I don't know if you've seen the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode, Remember Me, where Beverly Crusher is trapped in a warp bubble and the universe is just like collapsing in on her. It's a little bit like that, except everything is just falling into disrepair, decay, things are breaking. And so this opens up kind of in media res here with our hero Hector and his lifelong best friend John. And so the event itself was quite some time ago. But Path to Decay, Chapter 1. It was Tuesday at 7:45 and 13 seconds when Hector killed the twisted remnants of the only friend they had left in the shining, whispering corpse of a city. He'd met John 3 years prior on a university campus that might as well be lost to myth, that perhaps only two people in existence could agree had once been real, whether virtually or physically. And now, standing rooted on damp flagstones, glistening in blossoming sunlight, reflected in the polished mirrors of 100 impossibly branching, arcing skyscrapers, Hector unslung his rifle and took aim. John lay down, face down, wheezing for air, warped fingers pulsing as if trying to knead the polished tiles. Hector blinked away the auto sights through hot, foggy eyes that turned the courtyard into a hazy corona. John deserved more than a system mechanic. John's gray overcoat pulled around him, barely contoured by the frail outline of what had minutes before been a 21-year-old hockey defenseman in real life and an even more impressive Space Marine recruit. His arms pressed down, quivering, even the light mesh armor too much for stringy, knotted muscles, and his head shuddered gradually higher until Hector could see his withered face. John's brown eyes, action hero jaw, and somehow flawless sandy hair were the only things that made him recognizable, although his expression. Hector could never have imagined seeing John plead for anything. Once, John had skated off a broken ankle near the end of the season, taping it himself in a well-earned penalty box with what was probably an entire roll and downing a fistful of naproxen. No one even knew until after the final buzzer when John high-fived the losing captain and collapsed. Hector thumbed the rifle scope to bioanalysis mode. Procedure, scan complex life. Discipline, biological science 1. Inspiration 6. Difficulty 4. Successes 4. So much of John was just gone or unrecognizable. With 4 successes, Hector even knew that John had ingested 651 calories at breakfast, mostly in the form of questionably seasoned sausage patties he'd synthesized in their replicator, back at the haven they called the library. But it was John's actual life pattern Hector focused on. Even at the most cursory scan, he saw that John had taken 6 levels of fundamental pattern damage, a type of damage affecting him at the core of what it meant to be whatever this existence was. His strength and constitution, which should have held 4 points each, had been drained to 0. Clinically speaking, the effect clearly reflected in his proportionately reduced biomass and negligible musculature. It was a life pattern of someone in the terminal stages of extreme starvation and senescence, the weight of inertia dragging him into the inevitable, but not soon enough. They'd both seen how this ended for hundreds, even indirectly thousands of others. And that knowledge and fear is what Hector saw in John's faded, watery eyes. Fear that Hector wouldn't pull the trigger. John couldn't even speak, his dry purple lips shivering as he struggled to keep his face to Hector's, forcing Hector to make a reflective perception empathy check that almost brought him to his knees. The system couldn't leave them alone even now. If Corey were here, she would know what to say, how to take away John's pain in the last minutes to whisper a cool sense of peace and bliss around him, like a fairy enchantment. With this amount of pattern annihilation, though, even she wouldn't be able to weave him back together. The fact that he was still alive at all was a result of the contingent spells she'd spun around each of them, in effect, duplicating their minds and bodies. But there were limits. Hector broke his gaze with John to turn his face to the sky, slowly, deeply breathing in the dewy, herbal scent of the park. Nothing made sense. Not the sunrise burning away the golden amber of dawn, not the songbirds twittering away as though reality weren't crumbling around them. Not the immense clock tower, centerpiece to the entire park that never had and never could advance. Not the cruel, spiteful fate which had chosen here, now, had chosen John to embody the corruption that was inexorably reducing existence along a path to decay. Hector prayed wordlessly, unknowing to whoever had domain in this place. For John's soul, for his own. He wasn't even sure how many players remained or whether any of them were still human, or if that distinction held any meaning. He breathed gently out, finding the necessary stillness and sense of mindfulness. It was the opposite of tunnel vision. Instead, it was the acceptance and awareness of everything that surrounded him that had come before, and the ripples of probability now dancing out ahead of him, blending and fighting and whirling like waves from a dozen scattered pebbles. Things would change as they never had before. Time itself was different. Hector's gaze returned to John, past the bluing sky, past the soaring steel, down the wood and mortar tower into the eyes of his friend. Finally, the agony and fear dissolved into trust and certainty. In a brief, perhaps illusory moment, Hector felt John's own peace and a sense of Corey's otherworldly grace through him. And in that moment, at 0745 1300, Hector squeezed the trigger. And that is the opening.
Nice. I like that.
Cool. Thank you.
We
Thank you for letting me share that with you.
No, absolutely. We do have 9 minutes left if there's more that you want to read, or we can open it up to those in attendance to see if anybody has any follow-up questions or has anything that they have brought.
I like the idea of opening it up to the group environment for discussion.
Okay, okay. So most people are unmuted. I'd like to invite everybody, if you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to unmute. Do you know if you know how to raise your hand on Zoom, you can do that to be called on. I'm gonna figure out how to unpin David so that I can see everybody. You gotta love it from Steven, and you got a wow face and a heart with a smiley face with hearts from Lindsay. So
Oh,
yeah, that is lovely.
thank you very much.
Let me go into this. How do I, does anybody know how I unpin? Let's see. Remove pin. Okay, now we can see everyone. So does anyone have any questions or follow-up commentary or have anything that they would like to read that is lit RPG, Dungeon Core, or Isekai? Were you raising your hand there, Weasel?
No, unfortunately, I'm on a tablet, so everything has to be touched in order to change the screen.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Veronica, did you say that you were inspired by our panel last time to write something? Do I remember that?
Yeah, I am currently in the bathroom feeding kittens.
Oh, okay. Do you want to
But
just summarize what you wrote after our last
well,
panel? This, by the way,
sure.
this is our third time that Creation Station has held a Zoom panel, and we did one in 2020. I think we did one in, it was either 2022 or 2023, which was very
I think it was
special
22.
anniversary.
Yeah.
2023, and then this one. And we've hosted this panel at all three. This panel is very precious to my heart because it's become my life's work. Lockdown gave me the grace of being able to live my dream of working from home as an editor. And thank you to everybody who's ever let me edit it for you. I really appreciate it. And for those who would be interested in the future, I have a sliding scale that can go all the way down to 0 or barter, so don't hesitate to contact me.
Well,
So,
thank you
yeah.
also for editing for us. Some of us who have never been in the business.
That's true. That was the point of my and Falcon's anthology series. The whole point was to give people who either had never tried writing Dungeon Core before, like we got Jonathan Brooks that way. He had already published some LitRPG, but he had never tried Dungeon Core before. Or people who had literally never published anything before, but wanted to give writing a try and loved the genre. We wanted our anthology series to be an on-ramp for everyone. And I hope that we revitalize that series, actually. David, do you have any place that any work of yours is published, or do you have a Patreon or anything, or any way that you want? We've been letting people post in the chat ways that people can follow up and read more from each author. So if
You can,
you'd like
yeah,
to-
thank you. You can find my author page on Amazon.com. I should be the only David Moneth, but if you look up D.A. Moneth, which is it's M as in Mike, O-N as in November, A-T-H. So if you look up D.A. Moneth on Amazon.com, you should be able to find me and follow. Right now, I have just the one published novella. It's contained within the amazing Get Good Lit RPG anthology with Stephen Landry and so many other fantastic authors. So you can also look it up by that, the GITGUD Get Good. And then you can,
Stephen did publish that. I will go ahead and quote that and then republish that.
cool. Fantastic. Yep, that's who it is. And so I have you greatly to thank for that because I could not have gotten that story edited and published the way it was without you in the time frame that it was. And I will forever treasure what you did for me. Thank you so much.
And it was an absolute joy. And I missed Hector and Corey and was glad to hear about them again. And I am always here for you. So this has been a really lovely sort of family reunion feeling because everybody who read is somebody I've collaborated with on some level. And so many of you, each of you, every single one of you who read today has enhanced my life, not only by my editing for you, but through some other way that we are connected as people. And so, like I said, it feels like a family reunion. I couldn't be any happier about this. I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you all so much. And I haven't talked about it with the rest of Creation Station, and we are a consensus-based collective, but if people agree, I have a goal of having a tie-in Zoom day along with the live Creation Station during Game Storm, which is the last 4-day weekend, Thursday through Sunday of March every year. Game Storm is sponsored by the same nonprofit as Oricon, which is OSFCI, Oregon Science Fiction Conventions Incorporated. If you want to follow up there or search for GameStorm, they have a presence on Discord as well as a webpage. And coming up in just 2 minutes, we have Liz leading us through Healing Journeys Through Comics, and you'll make a foldie. If now is the time, if you have a moment, to grab at least one piece of paper. Ideal would be loose leaf, unlined paper, and the writing implement of your choice if you want to participate in making a comic during the panel, but you don't have to. I also want to say, when we held this panel last time, it was only scheduled for an hour, and it was so moving emotionally and so compelling to those of us who were here that we actually made a breakout room within the Zoom and continued for another full hour. And that's why this is a 2-hour panel now.
Thank you. And I should say, I've worked on this workshop a bit more. There is a journaling section as well. So if you can have one of these, or multiple ones of these, plus something to journaling.
Okay, absolutely fantastic. Thank you all so much. This has been absolutely lovely. Brandon Jones, if you can hear me, you are such a talented artist. I would love to see you stick around for this panel if you have time. I'll private message you. Oh, Chelsea, welcome, Chelsea.
Hi.
I just announced our Creation Station room at GameStorm. Chelsea is the head honcho for that event and does a spectacular job. And I did just mention that it's my goal, although I have to ask Creation Station for consensus, but it's my goal to have a tie-in Zoom for people who can't make it to GameStorm as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
So what's happening right now?
What's happening right now from 2 to 4, Liz will be guiding us on healing journeys through comics and how to make a foldie comic.
Nice.
And when do you want to start in terms of giving people time to trickle in, or?
I would say we give like a 5-minute window during which you introduce yourself and your work and put links in the chat to allow people time to come in. And then after about 5 minutes, we'd start.
Okay, cool. Well, I know I've got a little bit of, this will give me time to, not that one. So yeah, in terms of me in general, so hi, I'm Liz. I am a cartoonist and an author and various things.